Today we would be talking about the book which is Socrates' Republic, and this comes under the early Greek philosophy introduced for our semester 2 students for the Department of Philosophy, UGC NET syllabus. This is Dr. Ananya Barua, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy, Hindu College. Now, who is Socrates and why is it so pertinent that we need to learn or need to know about this gigantic intellectual figure called Socrates? Socrates is not just a man with arguments. He is a man who lived and died for the principle that rational, moral self-examination is the core of human flourishing. Now, for Socrates, his core ethical views are very well received. The first maxim that we come across when we discuss Socrates is what we call as intellectualism. For Socrates, virtue is knowledge. Socrates believed that to know the good is to do the good. That is, wrongdoing is not a willful wickedness but complete ignorance. So someone who might be aware as to what is right, what is wrong, what is ethically true, ethically false, and still does the wrong, it is what Socrates would say his knowledge has been incomplete. So Socrates says that if someone steals, it is not because they chose evil, but because they falsely believed the act would bring real benefit. Education and self-examination are the foundation of moral life, and to these Socrates had put across the first maxim of intellectualism, which is virtue is knowledge. The second interesting maxim of Socrates is no one does wrong willingly, which means that all humans desire the good. When people act wrongly, they do so out of mistaken beliefs about what is truly good. This challenges the everyday view that people knowingly chooses evil. Socrates was clear. We should correct false beliefs not merely because for actions would be punished, but because we are inherently attuned to something higher, something better, and that is all humans are desirous of the goodness. Socrates also talks about the unity of virtue. Socrates suggests that virtues such as justice, courage, temperance, pity are one or at least interdependent. He says so because all are forms of knowledge of the good. For example, courage without wisdom is reckless, not a true virtue. Virtue cannot be fragmented. They are expressions of understanding the good life. And so, to be virtuous is not really to pinpoint about the character per se, but the understanding or the expressions that someone is leading a good life. Socrates further talks about care of the soul above all else. For Socrates, the soul, which is also called as the psyche, is the seat of moral character. Bodily pleasures, wealth, and power are secondary. What matters is the health of the soul through justice, through truth, and virtue. In fact, Gorgias, who had said that, quote, "It is better to suffer wrong than to do wrong," basically means that an ethical life is basically a priority of inner integrity over external success. So, for Socrates, one needs to take care of the soul and not be perturbed by the external validations. Once our inner core is strengthened, our inner integrity is strong, we should not be disturbed or we should not look forward to what the others say. Our integrity, that is the inner core of the soul, matters. The most important maxims of Socrates of all time is the unexamined life is not worth living. He says that someone who just lives life without self-examining is not living his life to the fullest potential. Ethical self-examination is the highest human task. That is, we need to pause, we need to stop, we need to halt, we need to cease and check how our life has ethically been so far. Are we on the right track? Are we doing the things that have been ethically assigned to us by our soul? Are we being in alignment with the care of the soul? Or have we gone haywire? If we have, it is time for us to recheck, to rebalance, to revisit our faltering lines. For Socrates says that without questioning one's actions and beliefs, one risks living unjustly or without real purpose. That is, the art of questioning is pertinent for the soul to evolve, for the soul to grow, for the soul to discover his or her real purpose. For philosophy is not luxury, it is essential to being fully human. Now, about the concepts of justice and obedience to law, which are tricky and complex notions, Socrates, in his work The Crito, argues he must accept Athens' judgment and not escape from prison, even though it is unjust, because he benefited from the laws all his life. To disobey them now would undermine justice itself. Yet, in his other dialogue, the Apology, Socrates claims he would disobey a law that forbids him from philosophizing, because obeying God and conscience is higher. Thus, we see that about justice for Socrates is a principle. It is not convenience, that because it mattered to me or it was mutually convenient, I did it. Not at all. For Socrates, justice is one such principle that come what may, whether it is convenient to me or not, I ought to discharge it. But the line between civic duty and divine duty must be examined carefully. Socrates is also very clear, and he states that ethics is practical, not theoretical. A lot of people have this notion that ethics is all theoretical. There's barely any linkage with the practical world, and Socrates corrects this. He says that if we take ethics to be only theoretical and not practical, we are missing the whole point of being ethical. And Socrates lived his philosophy, walking barefoot, engaging people in dialogue, refusing to flee execution. Ethics is not abstract speculation, but a way of living justly and caring for the soul. So we see that if we are to discuss or summarize some of the essentials of Socrates' philosophy, for someone who talks about moral failure, Socrates would say it is because for sheer ignorance. Virtue for Socrates is the knowledge of the good. And he says all virtues are unified. About soul, he talks about the body, vis-a-vis the wealth, vis-a-vis the power, and that it is better to suffer wrong than to commit it. Examination of life is thus essential, and at every point one should be examining, one ought to re-examine his or her actions, thought process, vocabularies, and see where it is leading to. Now, the question that should be striking all of us at this juncture is, how did Socrates define justice? Unlike Aristotle, who gives a compact definitions, Socrates does not hand us a dictionary entry for justice. Instead, in the dialogue The Republic, especially books 1 to books 4, just a footnote, chapters are called as books in Plato's dialogues. He leads a long dialogue in which competing definitions are tested, refuted, and reworked until a deeper account emerges. Now let us see how did the concept of justice evolve. In book 1, Cephalus states, justice is speaking the truth and paying one's debts. To this it was refuted about returning a weapon to a madman would be just by this definition, but clearly harmful. Polemarchus chips in and states that justice is helping friends and harming enemies. And this was refuted that justice cannot consist in harming anyone. Making them worse would not be just. The sophist Thrasymachus further says that justice is nothing but the advantage of the stronger. That is, power defines right. Socrates refutes this by showing rulers can err about their own advantage, and justice seems to benefit everyone, not just the strong. Now, Socrates' positive account, specifically in books 2 to books 4, we see that he talks about justice as something which is not merely external action, but a harmony of parts, both in the city and in the soul. In the city, for Socrates, justice arises when each class, that is, rulers, auxiliaries, warriors, producers, does its own proper work without interfering in others. In the soul, justice arises when the three parts, which is the reason, the spirit, and the appetite, are in proper order. Reason rules, spirit supports reason, and appetite follows. Thus, justice is equivalent to each part doing its own proper function and not meddling with the roles of others. Now, in the dialogue The Republic, we see that Republic is just not about politics. It is a thought experiment. If we are to check the macro-micro analogy, we see that to understand justice in the individual, Socrates and his interlocutors build an ideal city as a larger model. For education and the philosopher ruler, they just cite the city requires rulers trained in philosophy, who ought to be lovers of wisdom, who grasps the form of the good. Now, justice as harmony, we see that justice as health is balanced in the body, justice is balanced in the soul. Injustice is like a disease. Parts of the soul at war, for example, appetite overpowering reason. So, justice is not simply giving each its due, which is the traditional Greek view, nor is it mere obedience to law or power. it is the inner harmony, the inner order, and the right relation. So, the Republic is one of the most influential works in the history of philosophy because it defines justice as a structural harmony. It moves beyond rules into a systematic account of justice in both individual and society. It inspires later concepts of justice as fairness, order, and virtue. It introduces the theory of forms and the form of the good. Justice, truth, beauty have ideal realities beyond their sensible world. The philosopher, by knowing the good, can rule wisely. So, for Socrates or Plato, a just soul and a just city mirrors one another. Ethics and politics are inseparable. It raises questions about who should govern, what education is needed, and how society shapes moral characters. And we see that this basically seeds later debates of the utopian thought, which inspires visions of ideal societies from Augustine's City of God to modern utopias. Now, about justice versus power, we see that Thrasymachus' challenge, which is justice is the advantage of the stronger, echoes through Machiavelli, Hobbes, and Nietzsche. About education and virtue, the allegory of the cave remains central to philosophy of education and epistemology. Critiques of democracy, it raises timeless questions about populism, expertise, and whether the majority can rule wisely. So, we see that Socrates' definition of justice in the Republic, justice is each part doing its proper role in harmony, both in the soul and in the city. And why does it matter? It matters because this view shifts justice from an external action like keeping promises or obeying law to an inner condition of order and virtue. Why the Republic is important? It is important because it is not only Plato's grandest philosophical work, but also the foundational text of Western political philosophy, integrating metaphysics, ethics, psychology, and politics in a single vision. So, now when we discuss the methodology of Socrates' Republic, we come across something which is called as the dialectical exploration. Now, dialectical exploration is stripping away inadequate definitions, building a model city or a soul, moving towards the form of justice. The core of definition here is justice is equivalent to harmony and proper functioning. Now, in the city, each class, be they the rulers, auxiliaries, or producers, does their own share of work without meddling or without interfering. Now, in the soul, similarly, the reason rules, the spirit supports, and the appetite follows. So, the nature of justice is intrinsic. It isn't extrinsic or something which comes from outside. Justice is a condition of the soul. Injustice is like illness. Justice is like a robust health. So, the goal of justice is pursued for its own sake. It makes the soul flourish regardless of external rewards. Now, when we talk about the justice, it is pertinent that we also take a look at Aristotle on justice in his Nicomachean Ethics, book 5. And there we see that Aristotle systematizes justice more than Plato. In a broad sense, we see justice as the whole of virtue in relation to others. A just person obeys the laws and lives in accordance with the common good. In the narrower sense, or the particular justice, justice or fairness is distribution and exchange. So justice basically from the Aristotle's viewpoint has a generic sense of justice and a particular sense of justice. Now these two main kinds could be the distributive form of justice and the corrective form of justice. In the distributive form of justice, there can be what we call as the proportional distribution of goods, honors, or burdens according to merit. Example, better athletes get bigger prizes. And corrective justice is rectifying transactions, restoring equality in voluntary contracts and involuntary dealings such as crimes. So, if we now look at the PPT that is being displayed here, we see the certain key contrasts between Socrates or Plato's Republic and Aristotle's. For the former, justice is harmony of soul or city, which is metaphysical and psychological. For Aristotle, justice is virtue towards others, especially fairness in distribution and transactions. We also see that justice is about proper roles, reason ruling, classes doing their work, and for Aristotle, justice is about equality and proportion, treating equals equally and unequals unequally. Again, we see in the former, justice is defined with reference to the form of justice and the good, and in the latter, justice is defined within the framework of practical virtue and law. Going ahead, we see that for Socrates, Plato in the Republic, it is highly idealistic or utopian, ideal city, philosopher kings. In Aristotle, it is highly practical, political, which observes real constitutions grounded in practice. In the former again, justice is pursued for its own sake, making the soul flourish like health. For Aristotle again, justice is both a moral virtue and a social practice, ensuring stability of the polis or the city-state. Now, why does all of these matter? So, if we see, Plato's justice looks inward. It is about the state of the soul and its alignment with truth and the good. Aristotle's justice, on the other hand, looks outward. It is about fairness in human relations, laws, and the functioning of society. Together, they form two poles: cosmic ideal harmony, which is of Plato, vis-a-vis a practical or legal fairness of Aristotle. So, the Republic, as we have seen, is or has been Plato's best known philosophical work, and that was written in 375 BCE. It is a long Socratic dialogue in which Plato's mouthpiece Socrates has discussed the meaning of justice, whether the just life is happier than the unjust life, and what the best possible city, state, and soul would look like. The book of the Republic mixes ethical, metaphysical, epistemological, and political reflections in a single dramatic inquiry. We must understand that Plato writes the Republic as a dialogue rather than a straight essay, because the investigation proceeds by conversation, which is questions, objections, refinements, and thought experiments and more. we will be discussing more about the form of dialogue which was picked up in Plato's Republic in detail in our next segment. Thank you for being with us.